Somewhere right now, a shipping lane is closed. A fertilizer plant just went offline. And your local grocery store, the one you drive past every day, is holding exactly 3 days of food. 3 days. Not 3 weeks. Not 3 months. 3 days. And history has a very clear message about what happens next. Here's the thing about collapse. It never looks like collapse at the start. It looks like an inconvenience. A shortage of something small. A price going up on something you barely noticed before. And then, one day, the shelves are empty. And by then, it's already too late to prepare. This has happened before. Not once. Not twice. At least 4 times in the last 100 years, in 4 different countries, with 4 different triggers. And every single time, it followed the exact same pattern. The same steps. The same chain reaction. Like a machine running a program, it was always going to run. So today, we're going to look at that pattern. We're going to go back into history, find the moments when food systems broke, understand exactly how they broke, and then look at the world right now and ask a very uncomfortable question. Are the same dominoes falling again? Early 1916. The Great War was supposed to end by Christmas. That was 1914. It didn't end. And now it's 2 years later, and a mother in Berlin is standing in her kitchen, looking at a pile of turnips. Not potatoes, turnips. The stuff they feed to cattle. This is what her family will eat. For months. Here's what happened. The British Royal Navy had placed a blockade around Germany. Nothing and no imports. No food from the outside world. Germany imported roughly 25% of its food before the war. That supply line was now gone. But the blockade alone didn't cause the famine. It was the combination of the blockade with one specific agricultural failure that broke everything. The potato crop failed. And the reason it failed was not weather. It was copper. Copper sulfate was the fungicide that protected potato crops from blight. Without it, crops were exposed. They rotted in the fields. And why was there no copper for the farmers? Because every available gram of copper in Germany was being pressed into shell casings for the front. The war didn't just kill soldiers. It ate the inputs that kept civilian agriculture alive. And once those inputs were gone, the food followed. Over 750,000 German civilians died from malnutrition and hunger-related disease during this period. That winter became known as the Turnip Winter. The Kaluban. And here is the line to remember from this story. Germany didn't run out of food overnight. It ran out of inputs first. Move the clock forward. Leningrad, September 1941. Nazi forces have surrounded the city. The siege has begun. And within weeks, the daily food ration for a civilian worker drops to 125 grams of bread per day. 125 grams. Take a moment to picture that. That is 3 thin slices. Maybe 300 calories. That is what you receive for an entire day. And the bread itself, it was not real bread. It was extended with sawdust, with cellulose, with whatever bulk material could be added to make it feel like food without actually being food. People boiled wallpaper paste to extract trace amounts of potato starch. They ate leather. They dissolved pine needles in water for vitamins. The city was starving, slowly, in the middle of winter, with nowhere to go. 100,000 people died in a single month that winter. The total civilian death toll over the 872-day siege is estimated at close to 1 million people. But here's the story, inside the story. The one that history books often skip. Inside Leningrad, there was a building, the Vavilov Institute, one of the world's most important seed banks, holding thousands of varieties of wheat, rice, corn, and grain from across the globe. Irreplaceable seeds. Seeds that represented centuries of agricultural diversity. And the scientists who worked there, they were starving. They were surrounded by edible rice and wheat, tons of it, and they chose not to eat a single grain. One by one, scientists at the Vavilov Institute died of starvation while sitting next to food they refused to touch, because they understood that those seeds were not just calories. They were the biological foundation of humanity's future food supply. To eat them in 1941 would mean millions of people go hungry in generations not yet born. They chose to die so the future could eat. That is how seriously some people have understood the relationship between food and civilization. Now let's talk about the mechanism. Because both of these stories, Berlin 1916 and Leningrad 1941, are not just tragedies. They are case studies in a predictable system failure. And that system failure has a structure. We call it the famine chain. 5 links, 5 dominoes, and once the first one falls, the rest follow with near mathematical certainty. Link 1. An external shock, usually war, but sometimes a natural disaster or economic crisis disrupts the energy supply. Fuel becomes scarce. Electricity becomes unreliable. Link 2. That energy disruption hits agriculture directly. Tractors can't run. Fertilizer plants shut down because they run on natural gas. The chemical inputs that modern farming depends on disappear from the market. Link 3. Without those inputs, crop yields collapse. Food production falls not immediately, but within 1 or 2 growing seasons. The shelves don't empty today, they empty at harvest time. Link 4. The transport infrastructure breaks down. Trucks need fuel. Trains need fuel. Trains need fuel. If energy is scarce, food doesn't move, even if it exists somewhere. A crop sitting in a field 100 miles away is worthless if there's no diesel to bring it to you. Link 5. With supply dropping and logistics failing, prices explode. Not double, not triple. In the most severe cases, by a factor of 10, 15, even more. Your life savings buys a week of food. And then it buys nothing. This chain played out in Berlin in 1916. It played out in Leningrad in 1941. It played out in Yemen, where a fuel blockade directly caused mass starvation. It played out in Lebanon in 2020, where a single explosion at the Beirut port destroyed 85% of the country's grain reserves overnight. Within 2 years, food prices had risen by 1,500%. 85% of the population could no longer afford to eat adequately. Same chain, different country, different decade, identical outcome. So, where are we now? Right now, today, the first links of that chain are forming again. This is not speculation. This is observable. Key shipping lanes that carry fertilizer ingredients are disrupted. Some of the world's largest fertilizer producers have curtailed or stopped production entirely. Russia and Belarus, 2 of the world's biggest fertilizer exporters, have been under sanctions, and global fertilizer prices have reflected that reality for years. Here is what makes this slow-moving and therefore more dangerous. Fertilizer shortages don't show up at the grocery store tomorrow. They show up at harvest time, 1 or 2 seasons from now, as lower yields. The pain is delayed, which means people don't react until it's already embedded in the food supply. Meanwhile, shipping disruptions in the Red Sea have forced cargo vessels to reroute around the entire continent of Africa, adding weeks to delivery times and significant costs to global trade. Food that was already traveling thousands of miles is now traveling even further. Countries are beginning to prioritize their own populations. India restricted wheat exports. Vietnam restricted rice exports. Russia controls its grain supply. The global free movement of food, which has kept prices stable for decades, is quietly beginning to fragment. And all of this is happening while your grocery store maintains a 3-day inventory buffer. A demand shock like what happened in early 2020 when people panic-bought empty shelves for a few days. A real supply shock, the kind where trucks genuinely cannot get fuel, where crops genuinely failed, where ships genuinely cannot dock, that empties shelves for weeks or months. The gap between what the system can handle and what a real disruption looks like is enormous. But here is what history also shows us. Not everyone starved. Not in Berlin. Not in Leningrad. Not in the Netherlands during the brutal hunger winter of 1944, when Nazi forces blocked food supplies to the Dutch population. Some people made it through, and their survival was not random. It followed its own pattern. 5 strategies that appear, repeatedly, in every crisis we have studied. The first strategy was access to land. In the Dutch hunger winter, children from the cities were sent to the countryside because that's where the food was. The countryside had gardens. It had animals. It had direct access to production. Cities, by definition, depend entirely on supply chains they do not control. People with land ate. People without it stood in line. The second strategy was stored and self-produced food. During World War II, the United States launched the Victory Garden program. At its peak, there were over 20 million individual gardens on rooftops, in backyards, in city parks, and empty lots. Together, they produced 40% of all fresh vegetables in the country. 40%. From civilian gardens, a 3-month food buffer isn't paranoia. It is the difference between a disruption that is uncomfortable and one that is catastrophic. The third strategy was community. Forget the lone survivor myth. It doesn't hold up historically. In Germany, soup kitchens kept millions alive. In Leningrad, neighbors pooled their tiny rations. In the Netherlands, community networks maintained social order when official systems collapsed. Your neighbor is not your competition. In a real crisis, your neighbor is your most important resource. The fourth strategy was hard assets. When currency collapses, and in crisis economies, it collapses fast, barter takes over. During the Dutch hunger winter, city residents walked miles into the countryside, carrying jewelry, silverware, family heirlooms. They traded gold for potatoes, not because the gold was worth more, but because the farmer didn't want paper. Real, tangible value holds when paper value evaporates. The fifth strategy was a practical skill that others needed. A doctor could trade medicine for food. A mechanic could fix a farm tractor in exchange for a meal. Someone who knew how to preserve and can food That knowledge was currency. In Leningrad, those without assets and without tradable skills had one option: stand in a queue and hope. In a city where over 1,000 people were murdered for their ration cards, hope was not a reliable strategy. We tend to think of food security as someone else's problem, something that happens in other countries, in other centuries, to other people. But the pattern is not discriminating. It has appeared in wealthy industrial nations. It has appeared in modern cities. It has appeared in our lifetime. The Vavilov scientists in that frozen building in Leningrad understood something that we have forgotten in our age of abundance. Food is not a commodity. It is not a supply chain problem to be optimized. It is the foundation on which every other part of civilization rests. Take it away, and nothing else holds. The chain is predictable. The blueprint has been written for us, written in famine records, in siege diaries, in the accounts of people who survived and those who didn't. The first links are forming right now, quietly, the way they always do. The only variable left in the equation is you. What you know, what you store, who you know, what you can do with your hands. So go plant something.